Okay. Okay, I'm going to, before we are going into the panel discussion, I would like to say a few more words about it beforehand, just on behalf of Adopt a Revolution as a short introduction maybe. The title is Imprisoned in Syria, and you might think that as we have someone who was imprisoned by the Assad regime, and as we have someone who was held hostage by ISIS, by Daesh, we might hear a lot about what it is like in these forms of prisons. But actually, I don't think that. When we came up with this title, we rather thought about other things, and I simply want to shortly highlight 4 main features that probably are in this title and that I think, or that I believe, are the main things that we see when we look at Syria today. First of all, probably Mazen was released from the Assad regime's prisons. However, I think we have to keep in mind that there still are tens of thousands of people that are imprisoned in these torture cellars, that are facing torture every day, that are living there not knowing what their future might be. And with the Caesar pictures, this brave photographer who took about 50,000 pictures of victims in the Assad regime's torture centers, we brought to light, and we have a good proof of how systematically the Assad regime is breaching all these basic human rights still until today. And I think this is one of the things that people that are asking to join Assad regime to fight ISIS have to keep in mind. They have to know whom they would want to work with. Another prison that we see when we look at Syria today are the sieges, and Ahem will be a good witness for that. There are around about 50 places in Syria that still are under siege today. Around about 1 million people are living in areas where there is no access, people cannot enter, cannot leave, there are military checkpoints all around them. And not only people cannot leave, not only the people are trapped, also there is no way to bring in food or goods or medicine or anything like that. Even though the UN in the last months, I'd say, maybe since the beginning of this year, tried very intensely to break these sieges, to bring in humanitarian aid after people died of starvation in the first days of this year. Still, the Assad regime is blocking too many of these aid deliveries, and still these, even though the Geneva talks are going on in these days, let's see how far they are bringing us with regard to Syria. Even though this ceasefire is used or should be used for delivering aid, we do not see that this is something that is really being solved at the moment. A third prison probably I want to line out that we see when we look at Syria is the caliphate. And for that we have Nicolas here, of course, who can tell us more about that. And this is a caliphate where jihadists are enforcing an extreme rule of Sharia law onto the people. And people are not free there to do anything. They are cruelly punished if they raise a word of critic, if they are expressing their opinions which do not go along with the jihadists' opinions. And I mean, many people might think that this is the form of resistance that Syrians want to have against the Assad dictatorship. However, I just want to show or use one example to tell you that this is not true. Hundreds of thousands of people are in this prison and try to free themselves, however they cannot. The example is the city of Manbij, where civil society was strong before ISIS took over the control there in early 2013. And there, after ISIS came to the city, activists and the shop owners, they organized a strike. They closed down all the shops in the city for a day in order to show ISIS that they are not welcome there. They want to drive them out again by that. However, ISIS was so cruel to simply arrest more than 100 shop owners, some of them are still in prison today, simply to enforce their rule of law on these people. And finally, probably this is the most obvious thing, they are the refugees. And this is the most up-to-date topic as well, for whom Syria became a prison. Now, as all the neighboring countries are closing their borders, as people need a visa to travel on if they want to enter Lebanon, and as Turkey, after the deal with EU, is even starting to shoot at refugees, Syria finally has become a prison for these people because Europe doesn't want to accept these refugees that they flow in here. But looking at all these, and looking at Syria, we again see only the bad things, and I want to stress out that they are not only the bad things. And maybe you have heard of the resistance and the rebellion in Hama prison that happened in the last days. And as there is resistance in Hama prison, there also is resistance in the whole prison of Syria. There are still the initiatives that are fighting their way, in a civil way, in order to overcome these two dictatorships that they are caught between. I want to outline that with only one example, and I think we of Adopt a Revolution are building exactly on this resistance, on this civil resistance, because we do not believe that war would be the solution for Syria in one way or the other after around about 500,000 people being killed. This one example is the Committee of Erbil, which is a besieged and shelled suburb of Damascus. Their activists in 2013, when the army of Islam, Jaish al-Islam, took over the control there and decided they want to build also a civil, or want to build in a civil way things to strengthen their power. They also thought about building schools, the Islamists did, but the activists thought they do not want their children to go to schools that are ruled or that are ordered, that are financed by radical Islamists that want to bring their children to read the Quran, where children are separated by their genders in different classes. So they simply try to be quicker. They try to build schools themselves, and they succeeded in that. They built 5 schools in the basement where children are safe from being shelled, and where they do not teach religion because they think this will not help in the future of Syria. And they do not try to influence the children in a way that they still have to teach that they are still taught the things that the dictatorship taught. And it is these forms of resistance that we want to outline. And with my different examples, I wanted to draw your attentions to a few of the guests that we have tonight. And with that, I hope that we see that there still is something good going on in Syria, that there is still something that deserves our solidarity, and we as Adopt a Revolution want to stand in for this solidarity, and I hope you are going to join us. And with these few remarks, I want to build the bridge to the panel discussion, which will be moderated by my colleague Christine Lüttich, and I'd like to ask Mazen and Nicolas as well on the stage.
Just wondering if you expected more guests on the stage.
Not sure. But it wasn't like that for the rehearsal. There we are. Yes.
I can't really see you well. I hope you're still having some breath and some attention left, because now the even more exciting part is starting. So I'm very happy, first of all, that all of you have come, because it's a very sunny day today. Luckily it rained a bit, so maybe we caught you because of that. But I think my two guests that are here on the panel tonight, Mazen Darwish and Nicolas Hénin, and also the important support of Nauras, who will support us with the translation, will give us a very inspiring and also a lot of insights into Syria that we don't really usually think about. I will try to be very brief. What we're going to do is we're going to have a discussion for around 40 minutes, and then we hope to be able to have the time. We are already half an hour late, but I still would like to encourage you to think about questions or remarks that you would like to voice after the discussion. So please feel free. We won't have a lot of time, so like 20 minutes, 15 minutes, but please feel free to put your remarks and questions after the panel discussion. So I would like to introduce, first of all, Mazen Darwish. In February 2016, he wrote an open letter to the Special Envoy of the United Nations for Syria, Mr. Staffan de Mistura. And he said, and here I would like to quote, "I have been feeling let down by the failure of the international community to take up its moral and political responsibilities throughout the last 5 years towards the Syrian citizens who have the full right and legitimacy to live with dignity, freedom and justice." And actually, Mazen, you signed this with a Syrian citizen, but you're also a lawyer and a passionate and long-standing advocate of free speech and of human rights. And already in 2004, you founded the Syrian Center for Media and Freedom of Expression, one of the very, very few organizations back then in 2004 to bravely promote human rights and the freedom of expression under the rule of a ruthless regime that brought Syria to being among the 10 worst countries, and this is from 2010, the 10 worst countries worldwide regarding the freedom of press, according to Reporters Without Borders. You have been very active even with the start of the revolution in 2011, and you were already arrested several times at that moment, as you just told me today. But the center was raided in 2012, and all the 14 employees, and Mazen was among them, and also his wife Yara, who's with us tonight, and many other comrades were arrested this evening. Of course, arrested without a arrest warrant, as it is usual in common practice in Syria. And Mazen just managed to get out of prison last August, and I'm really, really very happy, and I feel very privileged to have you with us tonight and to be able to listen to you. On the other side, of course, I would also like to welcome Nicolas Hénin, and I think it will be very interesting to hear also your experience and thoughts about freedom and the lack of freedom also in Syria today, and your perspectives on the civil society. And he came especially from Paris for us, and he's already leaving tomorrow again to Stuttgart, so I'm very happy you could make it in your busy plan. And Nicolas Hénin is a very famous and well-known French journalist who has been reporting for many years from the Middle East, especially, among others, Iraq and Syria, but also Libya. So countries he knows very well, and he describes as what he calls the cradle of civilization. And he witnessed all the events that led to the so-called creation of the so-called Islamic State, or as we prefer to call it, Daesh, because it simply means that we don't respect the kind of naming that they try to impose. And he was in Raqqa in June 2013 when Daesh took over the city, and he was also taken captivity and spent more than 10 months before he was relieved almost a year later. Luckily enough, you wrote a very important book about it, which is called in English Jihad Academy, The Rise of the Islamic State, for which he was awarded the Prix de Géopolitique de Nantes. And what is very interesting, I would really like to encourage you to buy the book. I forgot the title in German.
Der IS und die Fälle des Westens.
What is very important about the book is that he argues that Daesh is actually the result of several mistakes made by us, the West, and explains why the jihadist movement cannot be defeated by military means. So I think this already shows that there will be a lot of discussion. Unfortunately, we have very short time. So I would like to start the discussion by saying that in March 2011, the people in Syria took to the streets to ask for freedom, dignity and justice. And although this happened in the context of the popular uprisings in Tunisia, in Egypt and in Libya, many were surprised because Syria was always described as what they called the kingdom of silence, or some Syrians themselves even called it a big prison. So I would like to start to ask Mazen Darwish, you as a person who has been committed since the 2000s already to defend free speech, how would you describe the situation even before 2011? And were there any critical society initiatives allowed? And how did it change when the uprising started in 2011?
Okay. مساء الخير وشكرا جزيلا لتبنى ثورة وشكرا لحضوركم اليوم.
Good evening and thank you for coming today.
بقبل 2011 مع بداية 2010 كان في موجة تفاؤل لما استلم الرئيس الجديد الشاب خريج أوروبا. كان في موجة من التفاؤل دفعت مجموعة من الناشطين والسياسيين للحراك فيما سمي ربيع دمشق.
Before 2011 and in 2010 and before, there was a wave of optimism due to the fact that the new president came to power and he graduated from Europe, and there was like this wave of activism resulted in the spring of Damascus.
لكن فورا هذا الربيع كان واضح انه شتاء وقاسي، وبدأت حملات الاعتقالات، وبدأت ايضا عملية التضييق على اي نشاط مدني حتى لو له طابع انساني بشكل عام.
But this spring turned into winter quickly, and the regime started to tighten on any activism, even if it was like only humanitarian activism.
بالوقت اللي كان عم يسمح فيه النظام للجمعيات الإسلامية بأنها تترخص بين 2000 وال 2010 كان في ترخيص لأكثر من 5000 جمعية إسلامية، بينما لم تمنح ولا أي جمعية إلى طابع حقوقي أو تتعلق بقضايا حقوق الإنسان أي ترخيص.
In the period between 2000 and 2010, the regime was allowing and giving permissions to organize Islamic organizations, while did not give to any legal or humanitarian organization any permission to be active inside the country.
كان في العديد من المحاولات يعني اطلاق حراك. شفنا بفتره من فترات المنتديات المدنيه، كان في لجان احياء المجتمع المدني، كان في محاولات مثل بال 2004 الاعتصام قدام البرلمان السوري ضد قانون الطوارئ.
There were several initiatives like the civil clubs or like the civil society, and in 2004 we saw the protest in front of the parliament.
لكن بكل مرة
the protest in front of the parliament in 2004 to remove the emergency law.
لكن بكل مرة كان هذا الحراك يزيد هامشه قليلا، كان يرجع مرة ثانية القمع والتضييق بشكل عام. كانت اللعبة تتسمى لعبة الهوامش.
And every time the regime loosened the oppression on these initiatives, then it made it harder again. This game, it's called the game of the gray area.
كان في محاولة لإظهار هذا الوجه الحضاري والتركيز على مثلا السيدة الأولى اللي هي جميلة ومثقفة وبريطانية، لكن داخل المجتمع كانت آلة القمع وتسليم البلد للأجهزة الأمنية مستمر، وبالعكس بشكل أكبر.
From the regime there was like attempt to show the civil face by showing the British First Lady and her face, and like while inside the regime there was like given up the country to the machine of suppression.
حتى بالمعنى الاقتصادي يعني سوريا من بلد شبه اشتراكي مغلق تم فتح الاستثمارات، لكن أيضا تم خصخصة الفساد بحيث منحت هذه الفقاعة الاقتصادية لفئة هي ذات السلطة وهي مرتبطة معها طبقة رجال الأعمال مرتبطين معها بأفضل الأحوال.
Even from an economical point of view, Syria officially is a socialist state. But then there was the privatization of the corruption, meaning that like the people close to the regime were allowed to act in the private sector. That was brought to the country by the new president.
كان في محاولات يعني بالمعنى السياسي بالمعنى المدني موجودة ما توقفت ولا لحظة، لكن دائما كان القمع هو المبدأ الأساسي بهذه العشر سنوات.
There were several attempts of civil movements, but the oppression was the main title of these 10 years.
بالإضافة لنظام تعليم ضعيف بينتج خبرات وطاقات، لكن بدون ما يكون سوق العمل بحاجة لها.
In addition to a weak educational system that make graduates and experts, that the market does not need.
مع تهميش للأرياف حتى الظروف المناخية 5 سنوات من الجفاف أدت لهجرة مئات آلاف الأشخاص من مناطق الريفية وسكنت حوالين المدن بشكل عشوائي.
In addition to that, there was a fact of ignoring the suburbs and the climate factor that made many thousands leave their areas and live in a chaotic way in the suburbs.
ظروف اقتصادية كانت عم بتسوء، في ظهور فوارق ضخمة جدا داخل الطبقات الاجتماعية، والقمع مش بس عم يزداد إلا أنه عم يدخل بكل مفاصل الحياة اليومية، لدرجة أنه حتى الزواج أصبح بحاجة لموافقة أمنية.
The economical situation and the gap that was created between the classes, in addition to the oppression that started to be in every part of the Syrian society, to an extent that the wedding need a security intelligence permission. To be able to marry, you need a permission from the authorities.
From the security authorities, from the security branches.
بشكل عام.
So Mazen, sorry, just because we have to watch time a bit, unfortunately. So the situation was very restricted in any way. Civil liberties, any kind of usual civilian life that we would imagine was actually controlled by a regime that was posing fraud, that was imposing actually the security status. So what changed in 2011 for you?
مع 2011 بدأت يعني من لما بدأ الحراك بتونس ثم امتد لمصر، سوريا كان واضح انها مرشحة أكثر من أي بلد آخر حتى لأنه يكون في هذه الثورة. الناس فعلا بدأت بعد ما يئست من أي إصلاح حقيقي فعلا ممكن يكون في النظام.
In 2011, when the movement started in Tunisia and Egypt, it was clear that something will happen in Syria, and people have given up in Syria about any proper reforms.
بدأت الناس هذه الشباب تنزل للشوارع عم يعني بشكل فعلا مدني وسلمي، تغني ترقص. شعاراتها الأولية هي كانت الحرية والكرامة، العدالة، المساواة.
Therefore, people took it to the street and the youth was very spontaneous. The youth was singing in the street, demonstrating and dancing and chanting to liberty and freedom and dignity and equality.
يعني بدأ النظام فورا بشكل عنيف ردة فعله، بدأ يستخدم الاعتقال والتعذيب والتحطيم النفسي مع جرعات طائفية لدفع الناس بشكل مباشر نحو العنف والطائفية بشكل ممنهج ومدروس.
The Syrian regime answer was quick and aggressive, and it started to do the psychological destruction and give the society sectarian injection, meaning that there was systematic sectarian push from the Syrian regime.
يعني أنا بذكر بالشهر الثالث بالاعتقال الأول كانت هذه الشباب لما تطلع من المعتقلات بعد ما تواجه هذا الكمية من التعذيب ومن الإهانات ومن التحقير دائما تقول أنا بموت وما برجع على السجن مرة ثانية.
I remember in March, first time when I was arrested, I remember when the youth were getting released, they were saying that like I'd rather to die than get arrested again, because of the humiliation that they got during their arrest.
And the torture.
So Nicolas, you were also, through your work, of course, as a journalist, extensively covering Iraq, another country that is in the news since the 90s, but especially since 2003. And many people said about Syria that it's very complicated, we just don't understand what is happening. Many left-wing people also said, this is just another foreign-led intervention, and it will be just like in Iraq today, so there's nothing about a peaceful movement that is self-empowered. What is your comment on that, and how do you view the role of civil society in Syria in this regard? And what was for you the moment also to say, okay, now I have to go to Syria and understand what is happening?
Well, just a few comments. First of all, it happened that I covered the invasion of Iraq from Baghdad. I arrived in Baghdad almost 6 months before the Americans. So I was alone with the Iraqi people when the Americans arrived. And later on, I covered extensively the Syrian revolution. So from this perspective, there are a couple of lessons that I learned. First, an answer to this question of intervention. Is an intervention something good or something bad? Shall we intervene? When shall we avoid to intervene? Actually, if you look at what frightens us at the moment, which is 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 very equally the child of the American intervention in Iraq, the American invasion of Iraq, first, because this is from the Iraqi insurgency that Al-Qaeda in Iraq took birth, but exactly as much as the non-intervention in Syria, the passivity of the world after the Syrian people went to the street, asked for their freedom, democracy, basic rights and dignity. So it is wrong to say that on the one hand we would have an intervention that is good and the other an intervention that is not good. And by the way, the very same people who are accusing us to some extent to be willing to colonize Syria because there would be something like a plot from NATO to invade it. Well, these very same persons are today supporting the Russian intervention, which is nothing else than the counterpart of the American intervention in Iraq. And by the way, I guess it will end up pretty much the same way.
So back to the question on a very personal level, what made you, like when did you go for the first time to Syria? Because of course, when we read about you in the press today, very often it's unfortunately just reduced to you having been captured, being kept by ISIS, but you just told me today when you arrived from the airport that you have been many times before.
I have been many times to Syria even before the revolution. My very first time in Syria I was just a backpacker. I just turned 18 and I decided to just go and visit something else, and on a very low budget I traveled across Syria and I discovered a world, for the first time, a world that was not the world I was accustomed to. And afterwards, I traveled several times to Syria. It was, after I started working as a journalist, it became a bit more difficult because except for a very selected journalist, it's not easy to get a press visa to go to Syria. And after the revolution started, I started myself to try to go there and report. And actually, as early as September 2011, I crossed illegally, Turkey, the Turkish border, and went down on the coast over Tartus and Latakia, and
أهلا وسهلا بكم.
But never mind. But I went down to
Tried our best.
Sorry, I'm stressed. I went down to Homs, and yeah, I traveled 5 times. I made 5 reporting trips over Syria, all the time illegally, so along with revolutionaries, and I could witness that it's everything because of the repression. My first trip to Syria in September 2011, I mean, it was peaceful. People were chanting, dancing. I barely saw a single pistol during this trip. And after some months I came back, and then I could see that this revolution was getting progressively militarized, and after that there was radicalization, a political radicalization, a religious radicalization, and also, unfortunately, a sectarian radicalization. But all this was eventually a very natural response to the blind violence of the repression. So this regime is actually smart in the way that it knows its people, and it knows also how the international community works, and it's very good at planting traps, and we are unfortunately very good at stepping systematically on every single of them.
Thank you, Nicolas. I don't know, Mazen, if you would like to add something to this before going over to the next question.
يعني اللي بدي أقوله أول شيء شكرا لنيكولا. المسألة الأساسية إنه هذا اللي وصلنا له، الحالة الطائفية، حالة الأسلمة، حالة العنف والجماعات المسلحة، تم فعلا خطوة خطوة بشكل ممنهج من اليوم الأول.
I want to thank Nicolas first. The main thing that this sectarian situation and Islamization and the situation of aggression that's taking place now in Syria is happening by systematic plan from the regime.
حتى بالمرحلة الأولى لما المجتمع قدر يعني احتوى هذا الكمية من العنف والطائفية وكانت ردود الفعل فردية، النظام اعتقل هذه الصمامات الأمان وهدول النشطاء المدنيين والسلميين.
Even in the beginning, when the society could try to be patient and to swallow this sectarian systematic injection by the regime, the regime took what was the activists that were making the society immune from this.
بالنهاية مع بداية الأشهر الأولى بدأ إطلاق سراح معتقلين القاعدة من السجون كرد فعل لفشل سياسة العنف والطائفية. أطلق سراح ما يقارب 900 من سجن صيدنايا ومن تحديدا من فرع فلسطين وفروعة المخابرات العسكرية، وبيعرف تماما أنه هدول رح يروحوا بهذا الاتجاه بشكل مسبق.
By the end, when the regime knew that the sectarianism card and the violence card is not working out, it had released in the first few months in the revolution, it had released Al-Qaeda prisoners because it knew the directions they would go to.
We are talking about 900 prisoners from Al-Qaeda released between April and August.
And I think, by the way,
and for those who believe that the regime fights the Islamists, please talk to the Lebanese about Fatah al-Islam, and please talk to the American soldiers who fought foreign fighters during the occupation of Iraq, and pretty much all of these foreign fighters came to Iraq through Syria, and with the Syrian Mukhabarat organizing that trip.
Exactly, this is just what I also wanted to ask you, because it was one of the famous things, so we're already communicating without words, it's great. So I was just wondering, given all the situation, I'm sure you have followed it, unfortunately, for example, some of the main person that was released was Zahran Aloush, who was one of the biggest rebel commanders, what is called the Jaish al-Islam, like the Islam army, which detained most probably peaceful lawyer Razan Zaitouni, who has disappeared until today. And at the same time, he was one of the first people to be released from the political prison of Satnaya in 2011, right?
And also the leader of Ahrar al-Sham.
Aboud, yeah, exactly. So after Mazen, the arms are always louder than the voice of civil society, whether we like it or not. And today, more than 5 years later, most people talk about Syria as a country caught in a bloody civil war. We often don't hear the word revolution anymore, we just describe the situation in Syria as a civil war. It's so much easier. It's a fighting between Assad troops and jihadists. We don't even talk about Syrian civil society, so we simply don't exist anymore. But now, with the cessation of hostilities that were negotiated lately in February, I don't know if you have followed in the framework of the Geneva talks, it was very interesting because all of a sudden we saw protests again. Did you expect that? And did you feel there's still a role today for civil society in Syria?
يعني مثل ما كانت الثورة غير مفاجئة بالنسبة لي بال2011، أيضا اللي حصل من يعني قبل شهرين، وعودة المظاهرات وعودة الشباب للغناء والمطالبة بنفس الشعارات الأولية بالحرية والكرامة والمساواة أبدا ما كان مفاجئ.
As it wasn't surprise for me that the revolution, the uprising in 2011, 2 months ago, the return of the demonstrations and the youth singing for freedom and dignity was not a surprise for me.
يعني حتى اليوم حكيتي عن عربين وعن مناطق بالغوطة الشرقية، لا زال رغم وجود هذه الجماعات المسلحة لا زال في نشطاء مدنيين محافظين على القيم الأخلاقية الأساسية للثورة وعم بيحاولوا يشتغلوا، لكن للأسف مثل ما قلتي صوت المدفع أعلى من صوت العقل والفكر.
As you talk today about Erbil activists and and many other examples of them, they are like still trying their best to protect the main principles of the revolution. However, as you said earlier, the arms voice is louder than the mind's voice.
But do you still think that there is a chance for civil society to work today in Syria, or do you think we have to resolve, first of all, the political issue? Because I think this is one of the big questions everybody always has.
يعني أكيد الوضع ما وردي، وأكيد اليوم يعني اللي عم بيصير بسوريا هو يعني حرب بالوكالة، حرب دولية بين مجموعة من الأطراف ومجموعة من القوى الإقليمية والعالمية. لكن باللحظة اللي أسباب اللي بتدفع الناس نحو سلاح والتطرف بتزول، في إمكانية لعودة المجتمع المدني. المشكلة إنه نحن اليوم التركيز على النتائج بدون ذكر الأسباب والاهتمام بالأسباب بشكل خاص.
Of course, the situation is not great in the middle of this proxy war led by several international powers. But instead of trying to guess what's after, we should know the causes, and I think in the time when the violence would stop, there will be a return of the civil society.
Well, this is very interesting because also, Nicolas, in your book, there's something that, or in an article I think that you published in November, that was really in all the big newspapers worldwide. You talked about that question also of the root cause.
Yes, and I would like to rebound on one word that is really a key word that Mazen just said: proxy war. The Syrians are now living a situation that is desperate because they are deprived of their future. They have no more choice. They have no more leverage on their own fate. So basically, Syria is an empty field. It is wide open to foreign influence, and it became the playground for many proxy wars. Actually, even inside the different camps, you have proxy war. On the side of the regime, you have a war of influence between Syria, between Russia and Iran. On the side of the rebellion, you have Saudi Arabia and Qatar, each of them pushing the pawns and facing also the countering the Turkish regional influence and also the Western powers. And on top of that, all this is in the middle of the big fight between the Sunni and the Shia for the influence over the Middle East. And on top of that, you have what is becoming potentially a new Cold War, and it is also the place for the competition between the West and Russia. So Syria, the Syrian people, they are no longer in charge of their fate. They are just taken by godfathers who will somehow charter them to fight and propagate their political agenda. And this is what is totally dramatic in this issue. And it comes actually from one point. It is that you have read the newspapers over the last century or so. There has always been crisis in the Middle East. But the point is that what is happening today in the Middle East is not a crisis like the one we had 10 years, 20, 30 years ago in the newspaper. This is something that is a game changer. This is something that potentially can redraw the international boundaries that we know, that are on the maps, and that we inherited from the first Gulf War and the treaties. So basically, because there is so much at stake, everybody wants to push, because the result of the fight of today will have a huge influence for decades, if not centuries to come. And this is why, I mean, it's like we are in a big casino. Everybody, well, we have a stockpile of coins, I like this, and I hate you. And I don't want you, this amount of coins, to go into your pocket. So I will make an alliance with you in order, because everybody wants to put more coins, and we have a huge amount. We are playing our shirts, we are playing, well, we are betting everything. And there is so much at stake that everybody wants to put more. And nobody wants my co-player to take, because I hate him, wants to take the money, and this amount of money, or this amount of power, or influence, or whatever. So this is the reason behind, well, the fact that basically the situation is somehow frozen, and it's blocked to such an extent. I should be the lawyer, actually.
Yeah, so Mazen, how does it feel as a Syrian also to hear this analysis that I think we are all aware of, but as Nicolas just made it very clear, it's not just another crisis, it's just not another small war that is going to pass by. It's really a game changer for the Middle East. Some people are even saying it's the biggest change happening for the last 100 years since there was the partition plan in 1916 by Darfur and the French, not Balfour, by the Sykes-Picot arrangement to split up
and
the Middle East.
Lausanne Treaty.
Yeah,
Lausanne Treaty.
exactly. So how does it feel for you as a Syrian when you hear this and think about it again?
يعني أن تكون مواطن سوري بعد كل هذا الوصف أكيد. المشكلة أن اليوم النمط النمط المستقر الجيوسياسي خلال 50 سنة الماضية كلها عم ينهار بالشرق الأوسط.
The problem that the stable geopolitical Middle East is collapsing.
لكن باتجاه الأسوأ، باتجاه الطائفية والعنف والتطرف وترسيخ يعني مقولة إنه الدكتاتورية هي الحل.
But to the worst, towards sectarianism, extremism, and stop boosting the idea that the dictatorship is the solution.
الأسوأ من ذلك إنه ليس الشرق الأوسط هو الذي ينهار، منظومة القيم الأخلاقية بالعالم هي التي تنهار. كل ما دفعنا ثمن لإله من أجل الديمقراطية وحقوق الإنسان والديمقراطية والحريات هو اليوم ينهار حتى في الغرب نتيجة هذا الخذلان اللي عم بيتم تجاه قضية السوريين بشكل عام.
And not only the collapse, the worst what's happening is the collapse of the ethics system around the globe. All what we sacrificed for and we fought for in the past from the human rights and justice is collapsing now from the lack of action towards such crimes and actions.
كمثال شخص مثل ترامب أصبح حقيقة واقعة وممكن أن يكون رئيس لدولة مثل الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية.
For instance, a person as a Trump became a reality that, and a possible president to a country like the United States of America.
And I think it's very interesting because one person that I appreciate also a lot, and I'm sure you know all him, is the Syrian intellectual and former political detainee Yassin Harsaleh. And he published an article, there was an interview with him published in the French newspaper Libération. And Yassin Harsaleh said the following: instead of Syria to get democratized, demokratisiert, the word has become Syrianized, die Welt wurde syrianisiert. And he meant by that the values of responsibility, of justice, of liberty and equity, as you just said, Mazen, were swept under the carpet in the context of the fight against anti-terrorism. So, Nicolas, when you wrote that the main problem is Bashar al-Assad, when you experienced the way that jihadists are operating, when they exactly know how to do also their public relations, because they're doing it very well, how do you feel about the statement by Yassin Harsaleh of saying Syria didn't get democratized, but the world became Syrianized?
Well, I of course totally agree with him. And it's all, we have to keep in mind that it's all a question of publicity. The point is that terrorism is always the same. Terrorism is always a bunch of few people with limited means who will try to change the set of mind of societies of dozens of millions of persons. So basically, for these few people to be able to realize this, they will need a huge leverage. And this leverage, it is a fear. It is a terror that is in their name. That's why every single of IS atrocity will be filmed, will be propagated, will be shared, will be exposed, and will be somehow aesthetized. While the Syrian regime already built the wall of fear over the last decades, so it doesn't need any publicity, because its capacity to harm every Syrian knows it. It's still in the heart and in the back of the brain of every Syrian. So it doesn't need to advertise for its killings. Everybody is afraid of it, at least somehow. So the aim of both Bashar and IS, because as it is written on the cups that you can purchase here on the table, they are the same sorry? Shit, yes, I said. Did I say?
Yeah, same shit.
Did I say?
Yeah, same shit.
Okay,
right?
so same shit. Excuse my English. So the aim is to make basically to make everybody believe that they are the alternative. So basically, IS can address the Sunni Muslim and tell them, you cannot be with the kuffar, so you have to be with us. Because you are Muslim, you have to be with us. And the regime will address both its own people and the world, the international community, and tell them, you cannot be with terrorism. We are the one fighting the terrorism, so you have to be on our side. Basically, that's it. And the problem is that the Syrians, they are taken in the middle. They are hostages of the situation.
I'm afraid we will have to come to the last intervention because it's already 9 o'clock and it's very hot in here, and I feel that we also want to have at least time for 2-3 questions. I'm afraid it won't be more. One thing that also in this context is often said, Mazen, is that Syrians were not ready for democracy. The Middle East, the Arabs, the people who live there, they just don't know how democracy goes. And basically, even high-ranking diplomats say it quite bluntly today. So what do we respond to them?
السوريين مش جاهزين للديمقراطية. هل هذا يعني أنه هن جاهزين للقتل؟ حتى لو كان هذا الشيء صحيح على فرض ورح نحكي عنه، لكن هل هذا يعني أنهم يستحقون القتل؟
Syrians are not ready for democracy. Hypothetically speaking, if that's correct, then are they ready to be killed?
ما بظن انه يعني الثوره الفرنسيه كانت ثوره نظيفه او ما صار فيها دم. أو ما استمرت لسنوات طويلة.
I don't think that the French Revolution was a clean revolution that did not have blood and did not last for long.
بينوشيه مش من حلب.
Pinochet is not from Aleppo.
وفرانكو مش من حمص.
And Franco not from Homs.
What about Hitler?
يعني فيني أكد لك. I'm sure he's not from Damascus. Maybe from Austria. يعني بهذا المعنى يعني تبسيط الأمور بهذا الشكل اللي أحيانا يعني فعلا مزعج. ما في شعب هو جاهز أو غير جاهز. يعني هناك ممارسة، هناك أنظمة ودول تحترم القانون تتيح لهذه الشعوب أن تمارس الديمقراطية، ربما تخطئ بخياراتها، ربما لا تصيب، لكن ما في مدرسة بتخرج طلاب ديمقراطيين. هذه عملية متكاملة. هذه التجربة والخطأ والصواب هو جزء منها، من بناء بشكل عام.
Simplifying the case in that sense is annoying. It is the nation's practice and the state that respects laws allows the nation to progress toward democracy or not. It's a full experience. And it can contain failures and success.
لكن لما الأنظمة تعمل بلوك أمام أي خيار، لما تستدعي التطرف والطائفية، هذا طبيعي نشوفه. فيما لو لا سمح الله حصل نفس الأدوات والأساليب في ألمانيا، كنا رح نشوف نفس النتائج.
But when the government makes a block and brings to the country extremism and sectarianism, we would see in Germany, with if the same methods were used, we would see similar results.
يعني سريعا أنا ما عندي خبرة بالعلوم كتير، لكن ما بظن إنه في جين اسمه جين التطرف.
I'm not well experienced in science, but I don't think that there is a DNA called the extremism DNA.
And I would like to thank you, Mazen, because oftentimes when we celebrate in Germany the peaceful revolution that happened in 1989, meaning that the wall collapsed between the two parts of Germany and that we managed to have a peaceful transition, I often argue with people, but what would have happened if the tank was ordered by, back then, the Soviet Union to shoot at the people? And I think this is something that, talking about democracy and about the fact that you raised that it's really a daily practice and that it's something you really need to keep and preserve. I think right now in Germany we are very much in a position that we have to ask ourselves again, that we understand how important it is and that democracy is not something that you have acquired, but you need to work day by day. So I would like to thank you very much for this very interesting discussion that is far too short. If there are 2 or 3 questions, we might be able to take them. The mic also to be given in case there's anybody. There is a mic with Sarah, so yes. Okay, wait, I would just, please don't be angry at me. It's not because you don't look nice or you look better. It's really just because, anyway, I can't see anything. So I would try to take 1, 2, 3, and I think we're not having more time for that. Thank you.
Hello. Just one question. So, just in case the regime of Bashar al-Assad is gone, if he loses the war, what should happen then? Who will follow? As we all know, the Syrian opposition is mainly backed by Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Qatar. And all of these countries are not known for supporting democracy, for supporting humanitarian beliefs, or for supporting or for protecting minorities. So what should come after him? From my point of view, there are parallels to be seen as the Iranian Revolution, when all political movements started a revolution against the Shah, and in the end the religious movements took over controls till today.
Okay, Nicolas would like to answer this question.
Just very shortly, just empower the Syrians. Give the power to the Syrians, don't give the power to any of their godfathers or supporters. That's it. So do not support the regime of Russia or Iran, but do not, if the revolution wins, it will not to be for the country to be delivered to whatever foreign powers, Qatar or Turkey you quoted. That's it. Just the Syrians, at least empower them.
Next question.
Mazen, we will hear you also, don't worry.
What about the oil in that fight? And about the direction of the pipelines? Is this a reason for the global players to intervene?
يعني للأسف قد يكون العكس صحيح. يعني بعد ما صار في عندنا سيارة التسلا وأسعار النفط بهذا الانخفاض، يبدو أنه عدم أهمية النفط بالشرق الأوسط كما السابق هو سبب عدم التدخل الحقيقي.
Unfortunately, the opposite seems to be the right. The drop of the oil prices and the absence of the interest in the oil of the Middle East made this lack of intervening in resolving the issues of the Middle East.
Do you want to add something? No. Okay.
So that we can answer more questions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Georges.
Hello. 5 years ago, when the Syrian people demonstrate in the Syrian streets all over Syria, they were calling for democracy, dignity, and justice. What I like here is adopt revolution. It's still a revolution. Now there is what we call Islamic State, there are Islamic extremists, there are international intervention, Iran, Russia, whatever, but I feel that it's a revolution, yeah? And the international community, headed maybe by Obama or other that's leaders who are decision makers, didn't support this revolution. So is it still a revolution? What do you think?
Well, it's more a statement than a real question. Yes, indeed, the revolution has been covered by many other events because yes, you have international intervention, yes, you have regional competition, yes, you have a real civil war, but yes, you still have a revolution.
Mazen, is there something you would like to add?
I totally agree. We have all of this. And yes, apart from the whole picture, yes, still we have a revolution.
With these very beautiful words, I think it's time to grab some drinks for the pause. We have a break now for, I think, 10 minutes rather than 20 as planned. I think there's also the chance, Nicolas and Mazen, to talk to you while having a drink, and then there will be the concert by Aham and Steve, if I'm not mistaken, on the saxophone.